According to a 2015 study, millennials reported an average of 8 sexual partners. Additionally, between ages 16 and 20, half the population loses their virginity. And by age 22, 90% have done so. This suggests that many individuals in the 16 to 29 age group are sexually active.
I just learned and understood the value behind sex. God created it. God ordained it. It's a beautiful thing. God is not trying to rob you of your pleasures. And it's in the right proper context that God defines it for that actually allows me to flourish with the behavior. Maybe for you, that's the idea that you gotta test drive the car before you take it off the lot. Because if we're being honest, humans aren't cars. So we should just bury that whole perspective today, right now. Don't say that no more. Let Big Bro help you. A lot of the reasons why y'all having trash sex out here is because y'all trying to do this so fast and you connecting with somebody who doesn't even know your body well enough to please you the way you want to be pleased. And so you leave empty-handed, and now that's another body added to your score count. And you got the nerve to tell everybody that men are trash and women are trash when in reality, your standards are trash. I'm sorry. That kind of came off a little crude, didn't it? But I'm just being honest. Like, the bar is in hell, y'all. And I don't regret being a virgin all this time. And I know I won't regret it when I get married. Yo, what's happening, family? It's your boy, Coach Sean, in the building. So excited to have this conversation with you because, as you can tell by the title, by the thumbnail, and everything that's presented, we're talking about my story of virginity. And this is actually something that I did not expect myself to dive into in any way, shape, or form at this current juncture. But I think it is now more than ever necessary to share. And yeah, your boy has made the decision to not just be a virgin, but remain a virgin up until marriage. And so we're just going to unpack, right, a lot of why I've come to that decision, all those kinds of things. But first and foremost, I do have to remind you, if anybody who's watching this is new, hey, welcome to this safe space, this amazing space as we're just having a conversation, just me and you, chilling, kicking it, and enjoying some good dialogue with one another as we just continue to unpack what healthy relationships look like and what it means to have healthy relationships, which often first starts with doing the healing work on ourselves first. And sometimes that includes us having some honest, vulnerable conversations like this and learning why certain decisions we've just been better off in making, and what led to making such decisions. And so I kind of want to just start this conversation with obviously a lot of the common things that we hear, right, about virginity. In fact, y'all know me. Hold up. I'm about to do it. Hey, chat, give me statistics of percentage of people from ages 16 to 29 of having sex, losing their virginity, and having multiple sex partners prior to marriage.
According to a 2015 study, millennials reported an average of 8 sexual partners. Additionally, between ages 16 and 20, half the population loses their virginity. And by age 22, 90% have done so. This suggests that many individuals in the 16 to 29 age group are sexually active.
Can you repeat that one more time? I didn't think I caught you. So I tried to be cute, but check this out. According to a 2015 study, millennials reported an average of 8 sexual partners. Additionally, between ages 16 and 20, half the population loses their virginity. And by age 22, 90% have done so. And this suggests that many individuals in the 16 to 29 age group are sexually active. Okay, this comes from a plethora of research and searches from this deal. Okay, and this is really crazy, right? Because obviously, a guy like me, I'm in the minority, not the majority, right? And it's really interesting listening to statistics like that because it easily meets a lot of the common thresholds that we hear in these types of conversations, where it's like, you know, well, sex is normal. It's a normal thing. It's something that is clearly encouraged through the TV shows we watch, from the music we listen to the idols that we might have in our lives, to the mainstream artists or influential people that we hold as high regards in our life, right? And so we've easily been desensitized, and sex in its own right has been desacralized, right? I do think it's fair to suggest that that's the case. I mean, you can't even get on Netflix anymore and watch a movie, almost nearly watch any movie, if it's not a kid's movie, like that doesn't include something thrown at you in a sexual manner. We even got movies of AI characters coming into the play that are literally creating romantic relationships with people, as a sign or some kind of communication to maybe perhaps where we're headed in the future, right? And I don't even want to get into all that, but I'm just saying that that is a real thing, right? And so maybe you've heard, certain comments and phrases, such as sex is normal, right? Having losing your virginity at an early age, normal, right? Matter of fact, maybe some of you have had it on a bucket list and it was a goal of yours at one point in your life. Maybe you've heard the idea that women want men who are experienced. And so, yeah, I want a man who is able to show me the ropes in bed, who's experienced in bed. I don't have to teach him anything. Hey, this is kind of why we do the whole test drive, right? I want to test the car before I buy it, right? You've heard that phrase before. You've heard things like, oh, if you're a virgin, that just means you're ugly. You get no play, and you're really not the type of high value man that you may think you are, because you don't get out here and raise your body count with 404s and all these other kinds of terminologies that we'll use, right? And I'm sure if you're watching this, you've heard something along those lines that either stroked your ego because you fit into the crowd who has played a role. So you're like, shoot, they're not talking about me. Or it in some way, shape, or form impacted you negatively because you had a lot of people telling you in your ear through social media that you had little to no value, or you had no value to bring to anybody in a relationship romantically because you lacked sexual experience. And so in order to be wanted and in order to actually bring something to the table, you've got to get your sex game up. And what better way to do that than to get your status up, your money up, your gains up in the gym, to become more attractive and appealing to a whole bunch of women that you can then surround yourself with and have sex, right? And then that's just going to prepare you for the girl that you might want to eventually settle down. How about this one? Maybe this is the last one. You've heard of the term hoe phase, right? You've heard the term, hey, I'm just spending my 20s enjoying myself, right? And that can mean a plethora of things, but typically, especially in this culture, we know what we're dealing with. We know what we're going up against, right? Everybody is taking their 20s and their early years to just quote unquote get all of their fun out, right? I want to experience all the things. I want to experience how my body works and operates. What's the pleasure buttons? How many people can I get in my bed to sleep with, to create connections with? All these different things that in a place of maybe FOMO, in a place of not just fear of missing out, but just legitimate fear, also places of emotional wounds, emotional craters, and things of that sort. And so I think it's really important as we frame this conversation that this is all easily what you're going to hear from this story is all going to go against a lot of the common stuff that you're hearing from people on social media about sex, about the value of sex, and what that could mean to you as a single individual, someone who's healing, someone who desires marriage, relationships, someone who either has already lost your virginity, or maybe you're in my boat and you have yet to do it, right? No matter your age, like, what does that mean for you? And so I kind of just want to dive in to basically my story in response to so much of what we just read statistically, the probability of coming across somebody who hasn't done it. Like, what do we do with all this? Okay. So I just want to back up for a second because my story is really interesting. In the simple fact that I grew up in a very strict home. Okay. Parents who were very loving, who were very kind, took care of all of us in the home, came from a Christian home. Okay. So when you hear that, you automatically think, yeah, religious roots, right? You may be much like me, especially if you lived in a Bible Belt space. Like, it was always something that you heard, and no matter the church, the person that you ran into, sex is for marriage. And in the context of pointing people to sex is for marriage, you were kind of told simultaneously that sex is bad. Sex is nasty. Stay away from it. That's grown folk business, right? All those different kinds of descriptions that we would give to it. And I know I was a part of that. Now, I haven't grown up in the Bible Belt specifically all my life, but of course, I've spent more of my life in that space than maybe previous areas. And so I'm very familiar with that language. The fear of exploring how we are designed sexually as human beings, because, we just don't want to give any room to the devil. We don't want to give a foot for the devil to kind of expose and step into, when in reality, we're actually just educating ourselves on how God designed us and not being afraid to step into those spaces, to have the knowledge of, okay, this is how God sees these things. This is how God designed us, and contextualizing those experiences, our sexual character, our sexuality, in the right places. And so for me, I grew up in a space where none of that was really the case. It was always, hey, don't have sex, wait till marriage. Sex is a bad thing until you get married. Right. And so this also was something that stemmed from more experiences that I had in my life, where not only obviously parents being very overprotective and very, very mindful of the things that we were into, but also because I had family members who were children having children, teens having children. And obviously that is something that really, really, I think, in my opinion, from the outside looking in, kind of solidified the whole aspect of like no dating. So I wasn't allowed to date. I wasn't allowed to court anybody. I wasn't allowed to be romantically involved with anyone growing up and going through school. In fact, it was always, and maybe you can relate to this statement, you can have friends, but no romance, right? And obviously that stemmed from fear of those kinds of things happening that we were experiencing in our family, teen pregnancy. We definitely don't need more of that. However, it was also just from a plethora of different things. And of course, because I was somebody who not only had the fear of God put in me as a kid, but the fear of my parents, and just not really wanting to see what was on the other side. If I did disobey them, I was like, no, I'm good. I'm good. I'm going to stay away from that. And so I went through all of middle school, high school, not dating. And I say this respectfully because I do believe as well that a part of this conversation, there's room at the table for people who may not have the same kind of story as to why you are a virgin, right? I know for the longest time, up to maybe my senior year of high school, I wasn't the kind of guy that had hoes in my phone. People always clamoring for me and wanting me. Nobody wanted me. Okay, like just putting it out there, right? Nobody wanted me and was feeling me in such a direction. I learned of people that eventually did at one point when I was a senior in high school, right? So that's when that stuff started coming about. But for the longest time, it wasn't really something where I was like, oh, I'm fighting to get these girls off me, hoes in different area codes, and they all reaching for me, and I stood strong. No, nobody was looking for me in that direction. And I wasn't looking for anybody in that direction because I knew that I didn't have the capacity to contain that and actually be that in that space. And so, fast forwarding through high school, through middle school, and those experiences, we arrive at college. Now, college is a different spin. I still was able to walk in with my virginity and walk out. However, this was a little bit different because how I operated in my college years, more so the first 2 years of my college experience, it was more of a FOMO from what I felt I missed out on in my high school experience. I had a lot of homies being on the basketball team, doing all these kinds of things that were just out there having fun, connecting with people and just doing their thing, right? Sexually, all that. And so me being in those spaces, those group chats, those locker rooms, and hearing all that conversation, it was always something that made me feel a little bit more pressured. Like, oh man, so if I really want to be seen as that guy, then I got to step out and do these things. And knowing that I didn't really, and I couldn't really do those things at that time, what I ended up resorting to was lying, putting on a whole mask and convincing people around me through the way that I communicated that I had a previous girlfriend, never existed, by the way, for 4 months. We ended up going on a different, we separated on mutual terms and we were sexually active in that time. So this was so well practiced that nobody ever questioned that on me, but I was lying the whole time. And the reason why I was lying was because I was just paralyzed by fear. And the biggest fear for me at that time was not wanting other people to think of me in a way that was really negative because I wasn't doing what other guys around me were doing at the time. And this began my freshman year of high school. There was a girl that I considered a friend at the time who literally looked me dead in my face and told me she thought I was gay, after we were making a compliment to a girl in our class and how good and thick she was looking. And so it took me back by surprise, because I was like, this is way out of left field. This has never been said to me ever in the history of Everdom, as long as I've existed. And then all of a sudden this shows up. And so subconsciously, this made me go into a mode where I started trying to do all I could to fit in with the crowd. And even with the language, how I was appearing, how I would talk a big game, acted like this, that, and the third. I really put myself around people where it was easy for me to fit in, to the point where people would never really assume that I wasn't doing what the rest of the guys were doing. Like, I can remember coming out of high school and having conversations with people I encountered throughout high school, and later learning that they always assumed that I was a player, or because of my prototype, I'm a tall black hooper. Like, those three things just for some reason just mesh into you being labeled as a player of some kind. And that was just never me. However, I knew I could play that role if I really needed to, all because I was so insecure about the truth. I was so insecure about how people would really view me. And I was still seeking and moving in this space of external validation, to really in some way, shape, or form prove my worth to other people. And so just with that background, and obviously everything else that kind of leads to that, there's a lot of weeds that get into it, but just the sake of conversation, we go through high school, we don't really get into all that. And so coming into college, we started trying to play catch up. So there was a lot of, DMs, dating apps, personal messages, and just being really manipulative in a lot of ways. I was never really looking to commit. It was always a 2-week hit or quit type of deal. Still never was involved with anybody sexually, physically at the time. However, it doesn't mean that my hands were completely clean. Like, there were solicited pictures that were involved, being involved in those kinds of conversations where it was very dirty verbiage used, describing what we would do to each other if we were around each other. I know for a fact that there was at least a couple people that I had, or at least had in mind at the time, that if I really was that about that life as I pretended to be, as a means of saving face, if I really was about that life and I sent a message and we were to meet up, I am confident enough that I would have put myself in something I just couldn't have handled, and I still would have went through with it. And life could actually just look very differently. I'm talking perhaps a kid, perhaps just really damaged emotionally and mentally from those experiences. Because again, I was a guy that talked a big game. You would have never been confused on whether or not I was able to do what I said I would do, because I just looked the part, but that just really wasn't who I was. And so I did a lot of that in my early years of college. And even in the midst of experiencing those things, these are what I would find to be the most important things that actually place me back on track to not just valuing my virginity, valuing my purity, but also just valuing other people in the process. Because that was really a lot of what I struggled with, was due to my pornography addiction that I carried, started back in late middle school, went through the first couple of years of college. That addiction that was really had a stronghold on my life, warped my mind on how I saw women and what I thought women really wanted. Even going again back through high school, one of the bigger reasons why I made the decision to not get it connected with anybody in that space wasn't because I didn't find anybody attractive, or that I wouldn't risk it for the biscuit if the opportunity presented itself and I wasn't scared of the consequences. It was more of, I'm just witnessing so many friends of mine who are being connected, and they're just playing around. There's no seriousness here. There's no actual legitimacy for longevity. And I can tell that y'all are just two horny kids that are having a sexual experience and you're enjoying it. And so this is what's actually keeping you together, not because you actually care for one another, and you're conflating legitimate love with lust, right? Because what you're staying for is what you get out of, and not something that you're not, and you don't see that person as somebody you're willing to sacrifice for. Now, this is really deep, okay? I'm talking like high school thoughts. I know I'm not thinking this deep. Looking back, I have the language for it. But then, even though I didn't have the language for it, there was stuff that just did not seem right to me. And so because I didn't want to put myself in that place of being so vulnerably hurt and destroyed like that, at the simple fact that things could go right, but the moment we have sex and you don't like it, now all of a sudden I have no value and you're willing to just kick me to the curb. I'm telling y'all, I would not know how to handle it. And that's why for me, my heart really does ache for many of you who may be watching this. And as you're listening in, you may find yourself in a space where you thought, that somebody you were committed to relationally and who you eventually did give your body to, you was like, yeah, but this is going to be my future spouse, or this is never going to end. Maybe you didn't think about marriage specifically, but there was a part of you that was like, this isn't going to end, and I'm not worried about that. And then it ended. And then the 4-year, 5-year, 6-year, 10-year relationship is no longer in existence. And so you begin to really play this rehearsing in your mind, questioning your worth, questioning your value. Did this even ever mean anything to that person? And then, it just tailspins, because you really did give everything. Like when we're talking about a man being inside of a woman, bro, like that is a level of intimacy that just is unmatched. And so we can't play around with this in the terms of thinking that that's just is what it is. No, I think there's a lot more to it. And this is when we're talking about how God designed it, how God made it, God's intentions for it. Like, we're talking like this is a behavior of people who are choosing to become one flesh, i.e. being married. So like to do that outside of marriage, like it's another way of so many people using their bodies as a means of getting commitment. I've talked to enough people who, as they look back on their emotional wounds or even in the processing of it, they're like, yeah, I just thought that if I gave my body to this person that they would love me, because this is what I thought love to look like. This is what I only knew men to be like. If I could offer you something sexually, I know you'll take me, right? Like these things, and this is, and I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but hopefully you're catching on as we're processing through this. Like, people that are out here that are experiencing sex premaritally, it's not all because everybody's a hoe and everybody's trifling. These things have emotional wounds attached to them, identity wounds attached to them, mother and father wounds attached to them, attachment styles that are signals of not being healed from a specific area, a specific traumatic experience, whatever it is. So this stuff just really runs deep. And so that's why I really want to be tender around this conversation and be so gracious, because I don't want anything that I'm sharing to come off in a manner where you're like, well, dang, bro, like not only was I not thinking like that at that time, but I mean, bro, I've missed it. I've already lost my virginity. I've already experienced sex with somebody. So like, what are you trying to tell me? What are you trying to communicate here? And don't worry, we're going to get to the end of that and hopefully summarize a lot of this up. But before I just get lost in the weeds, I want to kind of bring this back to a focused space, because again, as we got to college and we, at the same time of us having all of these lack of commitments, these failure to commit experiences with other people, we really were starting to make a transition out of that stuff, especially when COVID hit. Okay. When COVID hit, a lot in my life changed. And one of those things outside of my basketball career, which was a part of my beginning relaunch to this whole channel, if you want to check that out, please do so. Link will be in the description. But outside of the basketball experience, there was also, me transitioning and leaving pornography behind, right? So actually healing and doing some legitimate work to overcome that addiction and that no longer being a part of my life. And so as I had to look back over my experiences with women, how I viewed women, and my tendencies toward women, I had to start being honest, y'all. And I was like, bro, yeah, I was actually being manipulative. It may not have been on the worst of worst in the spectrums, but it was still manipulative because I pretended to be somebody I wasn't. I pretended to be interested when in reality, I just wanted something that I thought you could give me for a moment. The attention, helping me out with my boredom. You were easy on the eyes, very beautiful. You pleased me sexually, even if it wasn't with each other. This was something that enticed me to go back to pornography and the addiction that cycled and recycled over and over again. And so it was a very, very toxic space to be in mentally and emotionally. And so even through all that, right, even through all of those experiences I've had where my hands weren't completely clean, although I was and still am a virgin and not experiencing somebody sexually, I mean, there were still so many things that I had jacked up in me that I had to actually address and deal with in order to get on the other side. And so I think that leads me to these three things that I think is extremely important when it comes to addressing virginity, my virginity, why I've chosen to remain a virgin. And hopefully this is impactful to you if you're watching this and this is something that you can relate to. Number one, one of the bigger reasons that I've chosen to remain a virgin is because of the value I've gained or the value that I've gained to see behind purity. And of course, we can point this to my belief systems, where I came from, right? The things that I was scared to walk into at first, because I didn't want to experience God in a negative way, right? Like, I didn't really want to experience the God that people painted in my eyes or in my mind if I were to take a left turn and experience sex outside of marriage, right? Have a baby, all those kinds of extremes that we could get into that are available when experiencing sex, right? And so at first those motives were, yeah, I'm just too afraid to do it, right? Like, it's out of fear. But as I continue to mature and grow, and especially grow in my relationship with Christ, I started learning the real value behind sex, and why Scripture tells us, Paul writes to us, that sexual immorality is not just a sin against others, it's a sin against your own body. And that takes it a whole different lane, because now we're starting to see sex in a whole different light. And one of the first things that helped me recognize that I was seeing sex in the best perspective biblically was learning that sex is not sin. Like, sex does not equate to sin. Sex is actually a beautiful thing that God created, God ordained, and God designed. And more importantly, the attractions that I carry as a human being, this is all something that God wires within us. The horny emotions that we get, the high sex drive, wherever your sex drive is, right? If it's high, if it's low, if it's somewhere in between, like, all these things are designed within us as human beings. Like, the very fact that getting sexually aroused, right? Experiencing horniness, experiencing being hard, women experiencing being wet, orgasms, like all these things. Like, God designed all of this, right? Like, this is not something that we should just be so quick to paint so negatively as a means of trying to keep people away from it. Because what we don't realize, and maybe this is maybe where some of you might be, it's a struggle, because when you get married and it's all of a sudden supposed to be this light switch where it's like, okay, green light, you can go. It's like we almost imagine the honeymoon and the marriage to be that space where we just start just getting on top of each other and never getting off. And I have recalled, especially in my own journey, of married men who went on honeymoons and they didn't have sex the first night, honeymoon at all. And so, like, all these expectations that we carry, because it's hard to transition out of something you've been taught your entire life up to this point. You've been single for however long before you ended up getting married. And so it's hard for you to kind of ease into that space, because now all of a sudden what you were taught was so bad as a means of staying away. People are now like, well, what's wrong with you? Why don't you want to have sex? So there's a whole different switch there. And so for me, one of the things that I have valued about my journey in being a virgin and remaining a virgin until marriage and being able to choose that is because I just learned and understood the value behind sex. God created it. God ordained it. It's a beautiful thing. God is not trying to rob you of your pleasures. And it's in the right proper context that God defines it for that actually allows me to flourish with the behavior. And it's not just me that's flourishing, it's my future wife that's flourishing. It's a space that where two become one, and it's actually a space of worship to God, because we're honoring God in the best way possible with what he's designed for us. And so when I started seeing that, it actually started changing the way that I looked at women, started changing the way I looked at people. One of the things that really helped me transition from the pornography addiction I had, that allowed me to see women as products and not people, was one, I started asking God to really deal with my heart. Okay, Lord, help me to see women and value people the way you do. And as I started noticing, and as I continued to go to public places, gyms, class, seeing all these beautiful women walk by in tights and yoga pants. And at one point or another, I'm just like, oh, snap, I'm all distracted from my lift because, fam, she is bad. I mean, she is fine wine. Oh my Lord, honey dip got a thing, just cooking, right? Just doing all those things. What really helped me wasn't the bouncing of the eyes. It wasn't the, oh, I'm gonna act like and pretend that person isn't there, right? Or get all nervous and jittery. No, actually, what helped me was, one, being honest about what I'm acknowledging here. Yeah, she is beautiful. Oh yeah, 1000%. The curves and all, it's there, and I love it for her. And this girl also has a vision, has a dream, has challenges, has a whole different calling and assignment on her life. And more importantly than anything, is a daughter of the Most High. And that helped me really start to see the value that women carried that went so far beyond whatever I thought they could do for me sexually. And I think when we think like that, it definitely leads us to places of extreme selfishness, narcissism at the very least. I know that's a huge proper term, and we'll get into that at some point too when we're talking about healing through relationships, because we use that term a lot, and good Lord. So I don't want to necessarily use that so often here, but I do think it can be applicable here, because all we do is we continue to save face as a means of trying to protect some fake identity we're carrying. And I think, it really speaks to the extreme selfishness of the human heart when we say, hey, this person, I'm going to box into a manner where they can only please me. Like how, like this whole idea of God made you for me. Like that statement is so asinine. And even though a lot of times we might know what you're referring to as lovebirds and romantic relationships, honeymoon phases, and you're just so in love, head over heels, I think the statement in and of itself is extremely selfish to believe that God only made this person just for you. Like this person has no other assignment, no other purpose, no other motive to their existence outside of pleasing you. That is such a dangerous place to be, and it's very unhealthy. Okay. And so I think for me, asking those things in prayer, being in time in prayer, dealing with that, but then also applying it, the temptations didn't stop coming. Right? It's not like I didn't stop seeing the beautiful women. I didn't stop having those thoughts. No, it was just, okay, what am I going to continue to combat those things with? Okay, let me recenter. Let me refocus. Let me stop pouring my energy into holding on to this thought and clinging on to it and allowing it to grow bigger and bigger and bigger to push me to extreme sides of lusting activity, masturbation, pornography, all those kinds of things, or trying to fantasize about this person, now turning them into an object, no longer seeing them as a person in the image and likeness of God. Now I'm able to look at it and I'm able to let go of that image. I'm able to let go of whatever thought I was carrying and then recenter and say, yo, but that person just there's so much more to their life, to their story, who they are, their challenges, their struggles, their issues. And so like, that's not just a body. That's a human being. It's a spirit. That's a soul. And we should honor that. Right. And so after many, many reps, and there were many times where it was like, man, it was difficult. It was challenging. But then the more I did it and the more I kept challenging that programming, the better it got, to where now it's not even something that I struggle with in the sense of me looking at women as objects. No, because it requires me to get in proximity to people to put context to them. Because without proximity, I just treat them as objects and not as people God created them to be. So now when I actually sit down in front of a woman, I actually am able to get in the proximity of a woman that maybe is attractive to me. It gets difficult for me to put them in a box and try to think of how they can please me, because I'm actually getting context to who they are as a person. Hearing their story, it humanizes them. And anytime we don't humanize people, we miss context. And anytime we don't humanize people and miss context, we start giving ourselves permission to treat them as objects instead of the people God designed them to be. And that's always a struggle. And so for me, that's the first thing, right? Like, I began to understand the value of sex and the value of people. And that helped me change my whole entire thinking on what sex actually is. Okay. It's not just for self-pleasure. Like, yes, I could experience pleasure in the midst of that. However, it's not something that I'm supposed to violate humanity in order to have in any kind of way. Right. And I think this also speaks to many people who maybe feel like watching this, I've had my innocence taken away from me. Like, it wasn't my choice that I'd lost my virginity. Like, that stuff was taken from me. And wow, that's such a huge weight. And I don't even know if I have the bandwidth right now to talk to that as much as I think just making room for that at this conversation. Because I think, again, as we and we land the plane, there's going to be something you really want to hear that I think is going to be massively important as you look ahead to what's next for you, despite the history and past you've experienced, and how amazing God is in just the restoration aspect of all of this. And so I really think that is probably the first thing that I would land on that has helped me continue to choose to remain a virgin until I get married. Okay. And then the second thing I will say that has helped me as well, is just seeing the value, like aligning my life and my values. Right. So again, I've told you guys before, right, as we open this up, came from a Christian home, knew all the things, what it was preached to, what it was preached about. And, it was really tough, because you can easily look at that and say, oh, well, you're just doing that because it's religious, not because you actually understand what you're doing. I would argue, well, that might be probably 85% of believers in the American culture that probably move that way. I'm not part of that percentage though. And the proof of that, the proof of that is actually looking into what God actually has to say about these things, and then choosing to align my values in a manner that reflects God and his values and how he sees me, how he sees other people, how he sees the world, aligning that with God, partnering with God in that aspect, and moving forward from there. And so, a lot of times, y'all, I'm gonna be so honest, like my values make my decisions for me. Not my lack of self-control, lack of self-discipline, not my impulses, not my emotions, not my horniness that I might feel that I turn into a slave every time I'm standing at attention and hard. I gotta let it go, because if I don't, it's gonna be blue balls everywhere. Like, no. What this is I have made a commitment to honor and serve Jesus. And because I've made that commitment, this is what he says about sex. This is what he says about sexuality, right? He says in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, do you not know that that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, right? Let's look at it, right? Y'all know I'm coming with the text because this is really important, man. Some of us are moving out here and we are professing to the world that we're believers, and yet we're willingly stepping into these spaces, and it's not a place of struggle and compromise. It's actually a willful decision. And that, my friends, is a dangerous place. But look at this. I mean, Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians 6, right? He says, oh, I'm coming. Hold up. Here it is. Uh-oh. Wait, I found it. Okay, here it is. So look at this. So verse 12, 6 verse 12, he says this: you say I'm allowed to do anything, but not everything is good for you. And even though I am allowed to do anything, I must not become a slave to anything. You say food was made for the stomach and the stomach for food. This is true, though someday God will do away with both of them. But you can't say that our bodies were made for sexual immorality. They were made for the Lord, and the Lord cares about our bodies. Ooh, the Lord cares about our bodies. This is the one temple, the one body that God has given me. He cares so much for it that he does not desire anybody and everybody to have access to it. And so for me to willingly give that to other people, that's a challenge, because what we're essentially saying is we don't really even see the value that we actually hold to just give it away to other people so easily. And this isn't to shame anybody who has been in those positions, because trust me when I tell you that the compromise is real, right? Like the compromise to be convinced that this is the person you were going to marry, but y'all were dating. Right. And he ain't made a move yet. She has not really fully made that decision to commit yet. Right. And so we were like, but this is going to be my girl one day. This is going to be my wife, my husband one day. But then the relationship falls apart. And so it's tough. Right. The compromise of, well, it's been 4 or 5 years. What else are we supposed to do? How else are we supposed to take this relationship deeper? Right. And so maybe there's the compromise of, man, this is actually something that I need to do to make a few bucks and pay the bills. Because if I don't, I'm going to be out, like these situations that really scream out to us and really challenge us on such deeper levels, and can really put our back against the wall, where we feel like we're forced to make a decision that we don't want to, but we feel like is needed. And I just want to tell you that, one, you're not alone, because I've made compromises plenty of times. Even if it's not in the same lane that you have. However, this is where we learn from our previous decisions, and we don't continue to identify ourselves with our past, but we allow those negative realities or those negative experiences to integrate with our reality. And we say, hey, this is what happened, but this is also not, and this is not who I am. I know that this happened to me. I know that I made a decision. I know that I compromised. And with the help of the Holy Spirit, this is now where I am. This is where I'm going, and this is who I'm becoming, more and more a reflection like him. And I think those are the differences in such aspects where we're able to move past those experiences and not allow those things to bring about such a level of guilt and shame surrounding our compromises and surrounding our decisions. I just read the stat to you at the beginning of this entire conversation that over 90% by the age of 22 have experienced sex in some way, shape, or form. Now, I just think that that's telling, right? And I just think that conversations like this just deserve a candid handling, and in no way, shape, or form should be handled in the manner of me moving towards you, telling you how great I am and how horrible you are. Like, that is by far not anybody's heart, because just like maybe you've compromised sexually, I've compromised in so many other areas. I mean, I even compromised sexually, having my whole identity shattered and shifted, leading me to indulge in pornography, so I don't feel like I have to put myself out here to appear as though I'm something I'm not. You know, like I'm hurt, and that's an emotional wound. And what surfaced through that was the pornography addiction and the masturbation. But at the heart, it was like, man, no, I just don't want people to think I'm gay because I haven't done what other guys did. And I just think that when we really address those emotional wounds, we learn why those behaviors are showing up. And then it's up to us with this information. Okay, what are we going to do differently? Because it's no longer a past that we can change. It's happened. But what are we going to do to make our future that much different and better? And so, yes, my belief system plays a role in why I'm choosing to remain a virgin and wait till marriage. But it's not from a place of fear. It's from a place of greater understanding. It's not from a place of I'm sitting here every day shaking and struggling and keeping my eyes closed, and I got everything blocked off, and I'm not going outside, and I'm not having conversations with women who are attractive, because if I do, I'm afraid I'm gonna just pounce on them every time I see them. Like, I think we glorify struggle so much that some things we identify as a struggle really honestly doesn't have to remain a struggle. Like, for me, yes, pornography was a struggle. But because I've gained so much understanding on what actually is at the end of the rope of me experiencing pornography, which isn't good, anything good come from that, I understand what I'm dropping, and I understand that at the end of that road isn't beneficial. So why keep going? I can just drop that weight, right? Some of us have experienced real life sex with other people, and so we think that we're just supposed to just shake and tremble at the fact that, oh my God, I can't have sex. Oh, what am I going to do? And I don't deny that there's a possibility of a deeper, slow transition from it, right? Because there's a specific behavior you're used to doing for so long when you felt an emotion rise up in you that you didn't want to deal with. So you went to numbing and dissociation. You were like, yo, now I'm good. I'd rather feel somebody than know somebody. I'd rather be felt than known, right? And that's all a lot of people are ever communicating is through that behavior. It's like, man, I would just much rather be felt on than be known by somebody else and putting myself back in a position to be vulnerably hurt and vulnerably misused. I just don't want to go through that heartbreak again. And I'm still horny, and I'm still really kind of wanting to get a nut off. So I'm kind of stuck in between. At least I can just kind of have sex with this person, block them, and then move on to the next, as opposed to getting to know them, because there's a fear of being known. And I just really want to make room for that in this space of this conversation, because those are emotional wounds that if we really want to see healing, we've got to be willing to address. We do. We just do. We have to be honest about ourselves, about our behaviors, about what we're doing, about what we're going, about who we are, about where we are. We have to be honest about these things and then begin to implement stuff that's going to actually help us move forward, instead of feeling like this is all that there is to life and this is it. No, it's not it. It's not it. Because I believe in the God who can restore. That's your past, but that doesn't have to be your future. I believe in God, in the same Jesus of Nazareth, who's the Christ, who died and resurrected. I believe that he has the power to restore lost time. He has the power to restore the things that were taken from you. He has the power to restore everything that you feel is incomplete, that you feel is incapable and unavailable for you to receive based on your past. Your past does not disqualify you from being available for what God has for you in the future. It's all dependent on us being able to submit to him. Really, it is. Like when we choose to do things his way and we see the value behind it, and we don't just look at it as rules, and we don't just look at it as, man, God just trying to hold me back from having the best time of my life. Nah, I think God is actually looking out for you. God is actually putting these parameters for your protection, because without it, we know how awful our decision making is. We really do. And so it's up to us to really trust those things. And so, yes, my belief system plays a role in it, and I'm not ashamed to say that, because it's the very belief system that I actually started looking into, not from a place of fear, but from a place of understanding, from a place of love and honor, from a place where my heart was so deeply changed and transformed that it becomes difficult for me to look at people in just the light of how they can serve me, because I'm in constant relationship with the Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, who's the Christ, who is constantly revealing my heart to me, and who's constantly challenging me to let it go in order to be a more reflection of him. And how in the world am I ever going to really honor what God has called me to and who God has designed me to be if I can't even honor the very images that he places in front of me and he trusts me with? Do you know what the biggest thing that most leaders today struggle with, which is why we see so many fall? They're not honest. They're not honest at the simple fact that they feel some type of way about somebody, and they actually need to communicate it to somebody they trust, so that way they don't get themselves tangled up and having another moral failure that leads to another scandal. You know, and honestly, a lot of that stuff happens because, I'm gonna be so honest, I got to look back at us as believers and as the church. And I don't mean the capital C church. I'm actually just kind of speaking more from an Americanized perspective, because how many safe spaces are there really for people to actually admit that they're attracted to something that everybody knows they shouldn't, but it actually talks more about a wound that they have that hasn't been healed. And so these are the things that we got to consider, man, because it's not just the fact that they're being nasty whores. No, fam, like there's such a story behind that. And I think if we take time to understand that, it's not that we excuse and justify the behaviors. Nobody gets justification for abusing humanity for pleasure. Nobody gets excused from that. What we do have an opportunity, though, is to say, yo, I actually get how you got there, though. Even though it's real messed up and it's real jacked up, it places understanding and context to that person. Now we're actually not just trying to get you to stop having sex. Now I'm not just creating content telling you to stop beating your meat and stop watching porn, because it's not a porn problem. It's not a sex. That's not the issue. The issue is the emotional wounds that we haven't addressed inwardly. And it's showing up through these outward external things that is just, yes, adding to the struggle, but it's rooted in a greater struggle. And so those are two reasons, right? We talk about purity, seeing the value behind sex, pleasure, those kinds of things, people, of course, that stem from my belief system and worldview. But then finally, man, I just got to be honest. I think one of the reasons why I'm still choosing to remain a virgin, and I'm happily going to proclaim that loud and proud, going to the altar and meeting my future wife, marrying, building a family, is, y'all, I just honestly want to look my wife dead in the face and say my body belongs to her. Like, I think that is such a huge, especially maybe for my own story, my family. There's a side of my family, I believe more so like on my father's side of things, where, they really came in with kids into marriages and relationships, right? They experienced sex before marriage, having a kid. And so it seems like, not to go as deep as to say it's a generational curse, but I'm just saying there's a pattern there. And what I want to do is be the kind of person that says it ends with me. And I will happily be that person that says it ends with me, because there's something that I'm able to start, and I'm able to be somebody who can shut the door. And same with my pornography addiction, not allowing that to run rampant in my life, but think about how beneficial it is for me to overcome it here. So that way I can be the safe space for my future children. If they run into anything similar to what I've struggled with, they get introduced to stuff when they go out into public spaces. They go on the internet and they see all these people talking about all these kinds of things, and they get to have a safe space, and we get to collaborate together. Hey, I know that you're seeing this, but I really want to know what you're thinking as you're seeing it. I want to know what you're feeling. I want to know what your body is communicating to you. So that way we can collaborate and we can learn how to deal with this together. So that way you don't have to run into some of the struggles that I ran into that took me some time to get over and to deal with. And I think, man, if we as men would stand in between that more and more, no matter your age, oh my goodness, your family was just better off. Your family's better off. And yes, there are some things that you have to grieve and let go of, because there is a part of you that's like, yeah, but I shouldn't have to deal with this. There were people before me that had to deal with this. That's true. And healing is in our own hands now. Healing is our responsibility. Our past, the things that happened to us that we didn't have a say in, we can't control that. But we can control how we move forward and the healing that is in our hands, and we need to be responsible for. And I really want you to think about this too. You know, in this analogy, I can give you the car keys, but you got to be the one to put the keys into the ignition. The car is never going to start. You're never going to leave the driveway. You're never going to leave your house. You're never going to leave the parking spot until you put that key in that ignition and turn it or push to start. And you put that car in reverse and you go. You put that car in drive and you go. I can only give you the keys, but you got to be the one to put the keys in the ignition and go. And that's the same thing with our healing, right? And oftentimes what keeps us from healing is that we're carrying stuff that just doesn't belong to us. Again, healing belongs to you. You making the decision to heal, that is your responsibility. And sometimes the slow up just comes from us carrying stuff that don't belong to us. I can't act like I came up with this analogy. I'm going to give my shout out to Dr. Zeb, man. He's just a phenomenal coach. Somebody who's had a real impact on my life. But this is a beautiful analogy that I want to share with you that hopefully makes this make sense. Because if you've ever taken a trip on an airplane and you had a luggage and it had to be weighed, some of those weight systems and weight scales, obviously there's a max weight that allows your luggage to pass that luggage check. And if it doesn't pass that luggage check because it's too heavy, there's one of two things that you need to do. You have to empty out your luggage, right, of the things that you don't need, so that way it gets lighter. Or you have to pay an additional fee to keep everything in it to travel with you. Not just going there, but also coming back. And I think let the luggage represent your life. And the simple fact that there's a lot of us who are paying unnecessarily. We are paying additional fees, costs, losses in our life because we are unwilling to let go of the things that had nothing to do with us. We're unwilling to let go of the stuff that doesn't belong to us. And the very funny thing about when it comes to packing, especially overpacking, is we have the tendency to take what we don't need, but leave behind what we do need. And I just want to encourage you that there might be some unpacking you need to do. You might need to actually sit down and let go of some of the stuff that you've been holding on to, that you've been holding all this unnecessary guilt and shame about, but it doesn't belong to you because it's not yours. It's not yours. And because it's not yours, you have the right to let it go. You don't need permission from nobody around you to let it go. Let it go because it doesn't belong to you. And when you're willing to let go of the stuff that doesn't belong to you, you're able to reach where God is taking you safely. Because we all know what happens to planes when it has too much heavy luggage. That plane gets weighed down. And if it's too weighed down, the plane won't take off. And the plane won't arrive at the destination that you're supposed to be in. And I think that's the same way with us. There are some things that God is actually calling us to let go of. Because at the very instance of us letting go, our hands become free. And our hands become free to receive what God desires for us that's greater than what we're letting go of. And we have to be willing to just separate from those things if we really want to experience God at such amazing levels. And maybe for you, that's the idea that you need to experience sex before marriage. Maybe for you, that's the idea that you gotta test drive the car before you take it off the lot. Because if we're being honest, humans aren't cars. So we should just bury that whole perspective today, right now. Don't say that no more. Because it's not accurate. We got to let go of this whole idea of, well, I'm afraid of disappointing this person. Like they really want it. And I don't want to disappoint them. So I'm just going to rather give in because at least there's peace and harmony within the relationship at the cost of at the cost of crossing boundaries and at the cost of downplaying and dumbing down your values to please this person. I'm gonna tell you this right now: if they don't have the patience to wait for you, leave. Oh, I felt that. Yeah, yeah. Me and you talking, right? Come on in the room. Come on in the room. If they don't have the patience to wait for you, then you have my permission to go. Because somebody who does not desire to wait for you, who does not desire to wait with you to marriage, is somebody who has yet to really see the value you carry and how it demands a level of commitment to get access to your body like that. Oh my Lord. Yeah, you got to get that. You got to get that. There's so much value in your life. And this is the stuff that has encouraged me to keep where I'm at. Because I'm not designed to be accessed by everybody, fam. I'm not designed by that. I'm just not. I'm not cut from that cloth, and neither are you. You aren't meant to have multiple women in your life, fam. You're not meant to live a polygamous lifestyle. Yes, I know where you're going. The same Bible you use is the same Bible that has all these kings that have multiple women. And let's look at the conclusions of those things, though. Let's keep the text in context. Solomon had 700 wives, 300 concubines. But what do we read at the end of his life? That the many women he was infiltrated with were the very many women that led him away from the heart of God. Do we really say that that's beneficial? No, not as a believer. Jacob had multiple. Jacob had Rachel and Leah. Worked 7 years, thought he was going to get Rachel, got Leah, worked another 7 years to get Rachel, who he thought was the baddest girl to ever walk the face of the earth. But we saw how that brought about tension. Just because he had 2 wives doesn't mean that God approved it. Just because David had multiple wives doesn't mean that God approved it. No. That we cannot associate God to a level of approval because we just see it in the text. What God allows us to see in the midst of the things he's working through humanity of is humanity itself. And sometimes humanity makes oftentimes humanity just makes horrible decisions. But that doesn't mean God is behind it. That doesn't mean God approves of it. And so I think we just as men, man, we got to be willing to step in the gap. Say, you know what? It's got to end with me, man. It's got to end with me. I know I didn't have all that I should have. I know that my family hasn't really been that supportive. I know I got a trail of history behind me of family members and people who have just done the craziest of things. I don't have to carry that anymore. I don't have to make that my business anymore. And I can make a decision to do something different with my life and move forward. And yeah, it's going to be challenging. I'm not telling you it's going to be easy. I'm not telling you that you just automatically, when you step into this, it's going to be so blissful and you're not going to have no temptations. Pornography ain't going to be on your mind. You're not going to have your regularly time schedule because you used to getting some head and some bed play every weekend. And so when your body is on a clock, 2 a.m., you up. I mean, you up, 2 a.m. Bro, I'm so used to this right now. And if it ain't just from you having sexual interactions with people, it was due to the pornography addiction and masturbation, you just up. Fam, it's real. But this is why we need accountability. This is why we need community. Because when we bring those things to light, you're going to get tired of telling people, hey, I slipped. You're going to get tired of saying it. And it's going to put you in a lane of where you have to do something different in order to get different results and live in a place of holiness and to live in a place of honoring God in the midst of those things. So absolutely, y'all, I'm telling you, purity and seeing the value, my belief system, my values that make decisions for me. And by values, I also just mean your perspectives, attitudes, and beliefs about the world around you, right? So the things that I know I value that often lead from the foundation that I carry spiritually, which is scripture, which is Jesus of Nazareth, who is the Christ, right? So my values come from there. He gets to tell me who I am. Christ gets to define my sexuality. Christ gets to tell me how my sexual character ought to move. And I have a decision to submit to that daily. And that is my responsibility. Absolutely. 1000%. So not only does my values and belief system play a role in it, seeing the value and purity play a role in it, but also wanting to see and tell my wife at the altar that my body belongs to her because she deserves it. She deserves it. Your future spouse deserves the preservation of your body. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people my age, some older, some younger, who have told me repetitively after experiencing sex for the first time, they wish they would have waited. And if that was like the biggest alarm that went off in my mind, because I used to think the whole time, like, bro, y'all having a ball, y'all kicking it. I know I can't really partake, and that's cool. I know one day mine is coming, but y'all killing it, y'all doing the thing. And to hear those people come back and say, man, I wish I would have waited, was just like, oh my goodness, thank you for saying that. Because this whole time I thought I was behind. This whole time I thought I was like the weak link. This whole time I thought I wasn't it. I just got more scripture for y'all, like, to just prove this whole idea of like the legitimacy of, you know, wanting to tell your spouse that your body belongs to them. Look at 1 Corinthians 7. Paul just continues on into this understanding of he's addressing the sexual immorality that Corinth is carrying, right? Just in complete context. And this is what he says in verse 3: the husband should fulfill his wife's sexual needs, and the wife should fulfill her husband's needs. The wife gives authority over her body to her husband, and the husband gives authority over his body to his wife. They give authority over their bodies to each other. So I do believe that it is a very appropriate statement to make when I say I want to tell my wife my body belongs to her. And we get to serve one another in such a way that I could not do on a one-night stand. Because there's a difference between intensity and intimacy. And this is hopefully maybe one of the last things I tell you, because I really want you to get this, because intensity is all about being rushed, right? You have a 3-hour window between the time y'all met, or maybe a 2-week window if we really want to consider everything. Maybe it's a 1-day window. I don't know how fast you really move on dating apps and all those kinds of things. But bro, you meet, you have some conversation, y'all connect, y'all find each other attractive. And in a 3-hour window between the movie, the dinner, and then the ice cream little date that y'all have, y'all walking around, y'all a little tipsy, whatever the case was. And then y'all come together at the end of the night. The end of the night is the nightcap, right? And the whole date was just the trial to see if we even got that far, right? And so what's crazy is we tried to rush so much context to who we are as individuals. We tried to rush so much of what makes us who we are and how we arrive to where we are in such a fast period of time that we tried to cap off with a sexual experience, trying to please each other in the best way possible. And can I tell you a lot of the reasons why y'all has trash sex? Let Big Bro help you. A lot of the reasons why y'all having trash sex out here is because y'all trying to do this so fast, and you connecting with somebody who doesn't even know your body well enough to please you the way you want to be pleased. And so you leave empty-handed, and now that's another body added to your score count. And you got the nerve to tell everybody that men are trash and women are trash, when in reality, your standards are trash. I'm sorry. That kind of came off a little crude, didn't it? But I'm just being honest. Like, the bar is in hell, y'all. It really is. And I think we have an obligation and an opportunity to really reset the standards and reset the stuff that we're really caring about, and make these Negroes wait. I bet you wait his behind out. I bet you'll find out what he really about. I'm on your side, sis. I'm not coming after you. I'm on your side. I'm on your side, big bruh. She better wait. She better wait. I'm telling you, bro, like, you're too valuable to just give that away. And I just think for me personally, it's just going to become such a great joy to be standing in front of my wife at the altar and just in the midst of my vows, being able to tell her that my body belongs to you, and that we're able to build off of this thing. Because oftentimes in this culture that we're surrounded by, we treat sex like it's ice cream samples. You go to Baskin Robbins and you get your ice cream samples. You go to Sam's Club, whatever grocery store that's near you that sells samples, and you get a sample of the product to see if you really want to take it, if you really want to go buy it, you really want to go down that aisle and make that purchase. Man, we treat sex that way. And I'm going to just be so honest. If somebody needs a sample size of you in order to determine what they want to do with you, in order to determine the next date with you, they don't need you. You don't want them. Leave. You got my permission. Boom. There it is. Leave. Skedaddle. Out of there. Boom. Shoom. Gone. Get out of there. Because that's not worth your time. And you just got so much more value to your life than to be limited to how you perform in bed. In a legitimate marriage that is supposed to be a lifelong relationship, this is a space where I'm able to come in, and again, just from my story and my experience, and I'm really grateful and I'm not ashamed to share, I get to come in without any additional expectations on my future wife. I get to come in and not have to compare her to another experience and try to, quote unquote, bring her up to this experience, causing her to step out of who she really is. That then leaves the space inauthentic because it's a weight that just crushes her and it's something that she can't carry. Like I really am so excited about that. I'm really glad that I was able to do that. Maybe you don't share that same excitement. You're still struggling and wrestling with this, but I just choose to believe that there's so much more value today. There's always been value to it, but especially in this society and culture we're in today, there's just so much value to waiting, so much value to who you are and how God has designed you. And that not everybody is supposed to have access to you. And maybe you're coming to the end of this and you're like, yo, I've just made so many compromises and I just feel like, wow, like I've just missed a lot and it's too late for me. I want you to be encouraged that God redeems the time. God restores what was lost. God is a redeemer. And it's not too late for you. You know who's a great example of this? And this might be an extreme, but I want you to see how much of a restorer God really is. When you travel into the Old Testament, there is an individual by the name of Rahab. Oh my goodness, Rahab, who is known in the city of Jericho as a harlot, aka a hoe. Ho, she's a hoe. Like, yeah, this is Rahab all day, right? But it was her hearing what God was doing through Israel. When the spies came in, they stay at her home. She's like, yo, these people got so much fear in their hearts from hearing what God has done through you and that his judgment is on the way. And she says, I don't know about them. Just paraphrasing. I don't know about them. I ain't want no smoke. I want to follow the God of Israel. And she makes a deal. Say, you know, just to give you context, like, hey, yeah, just hang a scarlet thread out the window. When we come and raid the city and deal with the city, we will make sure to save you and your family, those who are in the home. Stay in the home till we come get you, right? And boom, 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 that happens, okay, in the course of it. But you know what's so beautiful about this whole story? We don't have, she drops into this context. She plays a role of keeping these spies protected and safe from the guards of the city of Jericho who were looking for the men who they heard were in town and possibly were looking to destroy. She hides them. But here's what's beautiful about her entire story. Two things. One is she ends up getting married to an Israelite when she's welcomed into the community of Israel. This is so beautiful. Rahab got married. The same hoe we was just talking about got married. And I just want to put some more context to you from a biblical perspective. They didn't have no STD kits. I don't even know if STDs were really a thing at the time, to be honest. Maybe not. I don't know. But they didn't have any of that stuff. Like, to be even more graphic, the whole clean up, the genital shaving, the genital care, all that kind of stuff. Man, they didn't have access to that stuff. Fam, this was raw. All the way raw. Raw. I just want you to get it. She shaved, not a chance. Right? Washing regularly, not a chance. They didn't even have access to water as much as often as we do in a first world country, speaking from an American perspective. Like, so think about this. All the things that we would look at today and say that's such a huge disadvantage for us. God does an amazing thing through Rahab and restores and redeems her. And I'm just using this as an example, not just one that she gets married, right? As a harlot who ends up getting married to an Israelite man. Oh my goodness. What a story of redemption. But here's the second part, which is also really dope. She's a part of the lineage of Jesus. She's actually included in the lineage of the coming Christ. So Jesus isn't afraid of associating with her either, even though she has a crazy raunchy past. So I'm just saying, man, like, I think there's so much value to who you are that, yes, you may have had a crazy past, but God still redeems. And even though there are so many people on social media that are trying to devalue you and defame you into telling you and convincing you that you bring no value to a relationship because you got kids and you aren't married, that you bring no value to the relationship because you've been married and divorced, that you bring no value to the relationship because your body count is through the roof, that you bring no value to the relationship because of all this X, Y, Z and all the things you carried. I'm just here to tell you, man, that yes, we have to acknowledge that past. And no, we can't move with the attitude of God accepts me, so you should. What we should do, however, is be so appreciative of the redemptive work of Christ on the cross and know that it even reaches to us, not just from a spiritual place, but also to redeem us emotionally, mentally, physically. Like God desires to redeem all of you, not just a part of you, and him going to the cross. But what's so beautiful about this is it doesn't leave you out of reach of experiencing those things that you felt you could never get due to your past. Your past doesn't disqualify you from those things. It doesn't. And maybe God has marriage in sight for you. Maybe he does. Maybe he doesn't. Regardless, choose to stay with him. Choose to stay with him. Like, because this is where the life is, right? This is where the life is. And so my encouragement to you, with all of that being said, is that it's not too late for you to make different decisions moving forward. Yes, you made those decisions and you compromised. You had boyfriends and girlfriends in the past who you experienced sexual relationships with. And man, it's actually been even a tougher time getting over them, because not only did you experience them and invest in them emotionally and mentally, but then we added the physical component too. So the whole separation factor takes a little bit longer to grieve through, because you're not just grieving what you dealt with them emotionally and mentally, you're grieving what you experienced them sexually as well. And so absolutely, that stuff does have a little bit of a longer effect. Doesn't mean it makes it easier, but it does have a longer effect. Maybe you've been there. You're not alone. You're not the only person to deal with that. My encouragement to you is that now you have an opportunity to do something different. And I think, take it from me, who has never experienced perhaps having sexual encounters, not perhaps, but take it from me, who has not experienced sexual encounters with somebody else or anybody else physically. Even though it was something I was once ashamed of before and so guilty of due to cultural expectations, I'm so glad that I was able to connect to the one who designed it, that led me to understand the value that I hold, the value of waiting, the value of preserving my body, and the value of humans and people and pleasure in its proper context to the way he describes it. And I don't regret being a virgin all this time. And I know I won't regret it when I get married. Like, I'm not even tripping about the whole fact that the first time we have sex, it might not be as great as maybe it's expected. Because we got a whole life to build on this. What are we tripping for? We get to learn each other's bodies and dive even deeper into it. Who's hating on that? With amazing communication skills that are built on that? Bro, come on. Who's hating on that? The only people who are actually hating on that are people who are just operating in their own dysfunctional wounds and haven't really dealt with them. And so maybe you're at the pinnacle place of trying to choose, man, should I wait? Should I preserve? Man, maybe this red pill space should actually be something I should dive into, because this heartbreaking wound is just too much for me, man. So I just would rather sex it out. And I just think, man, what do you get at the end of that though? Yeah, you get some pleasure and it goes away for maybe about however long you're having sex, 5-10 minutes, give or take. Right? Like, you experiencing that, and then what? You're going to come home and the feeling is going to come back up. And every time you get into somebody else's bed and drawers, it's going to keep coming back up right after you experience that, which tells us that the sex isn't the solvent. It's not the solution. What is the solution is, instead of disassociating ourselves from our emotions, we actually learn to ground ourselves in our emotions, be present in those things, and get into a community of a safe space that allows us to do those things and process through it. Because we just need men to start moving, and we just need people, men and women, to just start operating in spaces of being healed and wanting to be healed and sitting down somewhere to do the healing. I am not on the team of you being able to hook up with anybody as a means of healing. I am not on the team of you in your healing era, but really you're just in your sex era and your whole era. I'm not on the team. I'm not on the team of supporting you going out here and going on dates and you are emotionally distraught and almost destroyed. Don't do that. Take some time to yourself. Get into some community with some trusted people who can help you process through these things. Because that's what we need. It's an opportunity, because these things just really speak to some deeper wounds than we realize. And we got to give ourselves time to deal with that stuff, because it takes time. It takes time, and we don't want to pervert something God desired to be so beautiful between two people making a covenant with each other and him. We don't want to get in the process of perverting that because we don't want to feel our wounds. And I don't want that for you either. So that's why I got a whole community dedicated just to a safe space for healed men. If that's something that you want, that's something you're interested in, and you know you can resonate with this kind of conversation and need more of it, definitely get into the description below. It's free, able to join. And, obviously with so many different accountability spaces, challenges, things of that sort that we just keep up with in the whole community, I'm excited to connect with you there because there's just so many more conversations where this comes from that allows us to really process those emotions healthily. So that way we can actually start creating healthier relationships with people. Learn how to be friends with attractive people. Learn how to let go of the fantasies that we carry that have kept us from actually having legitimate relationships and have made them turn into transactional relationships. I'm talking us being able to be so healed and restored from these things that we don't find ourselves looking at people as objects, but we see them in the image and likeness that God designed them in, reflecting him. An image bearer. Like getting into the place where we can actually address that some of the rooted issues that we have isn't because we are terrible at relationships and we're just god awful. It's actually because of our attachment wounds, our attachment styles. It's actually because we have yet to actually address the very first breakup that we went through. And so that just kind of kept us bleeding on people and bleeding on people and bleeding on people and never really addressing the wound. Addressing perspectives that we've carried for so long that came from people who also were broken and unhealed. But because they had some level of authority over our lives, we just kind of went with it. We were just like, whatever. Nah, fam, it's time that we just move in a different direction, and we start living differently and living a transformed life. I got an excerpt I want to share with you guys. I'm all big on books. Madison Pruitt, The Love Everybody Wants. If you guys need this book, I need you guys to check this out. She is phenomenal. Her book is phenomenal. And there's an excerpt that I really want to share with you guys because she shares the story. Of course, her target audience is not a guy, right? I don't think she had a guy in vision at all writing this. However, I picked this up because it was a very valuable book that I remember hearing about for so long. And she talks about a lot of things that I expected. I mean, using so many cultural terms and perspectives and yet bringing it back to a very grounded space to help us understand the value of relationships, the value of people, the value that we carry, the value of sex, the value of romance, and the value of doing things God's way. Okay, that's how I would summarize that in essence. But I want you guys to check this out because this is so beautiful that I think is a wonderful analogy that's going to tie all this up, because I told you guys that one of the common things that you'll hear in dating and doing relationships is people thinking that they have to test drive it in order to see if it's something they want. And maybe it's not always in the form of sex as it is, hey, I need to move in with you to see if I really want to live with you. Hey, I really need to do this X, Y, and Z with you to actually see if this is something that I really want to do with you for the rest of my life. And we're cheating covenant. And we're being dysfunction. We're making covenant with dysfunction. So hear me out. This is beautiful. When I got my first car, this is on, let me say it like this. It's on page 143. Maybe you got the book on you. This is in her chapter of Drive Before You Buy, Pursuing Purity Protects Purpose. Shout out Madison Pruitt, man. This is just fire. I just want to read this. When I got my first car, it was Christmas Day, and my parents sent me on a scavenger hunt. One clue leading to the next, I was so anxious to see what I got. My mom videoed my every movement. My sisters followed me around eagerly. My dad was just proud to be there. We were all in our matching pajamas, which was our Christmas tradition. I had no idea what to expect, but I knew it had to be something big because the video camera was out. I finally got the last clue, and it led me to the driveway. I couldn't believe it. An all-white car with a big shiny red bow. I thought, this is for me? My sister Mallory started crying. She was so happy for me. I couldn't believe my parents pulled off such a big surprise without me finding out. And of course, I couldn't believe they got me a car. I was so thrilled and shocked. I immediately began thinking about the playlist I was going to make for late night drives with my friends. I hugged my parents tightly. I wanted them to feel my appreciation. I opened the driver's door, sat down inside, and took a deep breath. It had the new car smell. I just want to pause for a second. If you remember getting your first car, this resonates too well with you, right? You just... the new car smell, just phenomenal, right? So check this out. This is the killer. I sat in the car for hours just taking it in. Then I adjusted my rearview mirror, scooted up my seat, and pulled out of the driveway. I remember thinking, this car is perfect. It's everything I love in a car and exactly what I would have picked out. It drives like a dream. But I want to make a point here. I didn't have to test drive the car first because my dad did. Huh? Huh? Can I say it again? I didn't have to test drive the car first because my dad did. My dad went to the dealership, looked at all the options, drove the car around, and decided, yep, this is one is made for Maddie. My dad knew exactly what I wanted and, more importantly, what I needed. And how much more does your Heavenly Father know exactly what you need? He knows every desire of your heart. He put the desires there. And let me tell you, when you trust your Father to give you exactly what you need, it's always better than what you could have ever picked out for yourself. I mean, there's so many things that I could read from this book, but I just want to share that with you because this whole deal that you have to test drive the car before you buy it is trash and we should throw it out. 2025, don't use that no more. We've already said it, but I'm going to say it again. Don't use that no more, right? When you really trust in the Father who knows what you like, God is not going to play you so dirty and set you up with something that doesn't align with what you don't like. Now, some of us got to change what we like because some of us still got a taste for worldly things and we're expecting God to deliver a man or a woman for us. But when in reality, we're using worldly standards to define what that woman looks like. Instagram has told you that women look a certain way, that the Jillianaises of the world are the most attractive. Instagram models are the most attractive. Right? All these women that are above your bracket in a lot of ways have just told you that if you don't find a girl like that, she ain't your girl. It's just your turn. She ain't, you know what I'm saying? Like all these different terminologies that we're just hearing repetitively from people, and it's trash. It's all garbage because it's not a reflection of the standards that God has set before us. And I'm not saying that in the process of you doing things God's way that you still won't experience heartbreak. But we have to find a way to deal with that heartbreak in a very fair and concise way. So that way we don't start just taking out our pain on everybody and start treating people like products instead of people as God sees them. And I think you saying that this is a test drive that I need to figure out, I think we just have to question our own heart and motives and realize just how dehumanizing that is to turn somebody into an object, to make them feel like they got to prove to you their worth before you take them home. Just tells me that you don't even know the value that stands in front of you. And better yet, you don't even know the value that you carry. And I think if we got to that place of understanding that, and more importantly than anything, depending on the Father, seeing him as our Father, who takes care of his children, who isn't a deadbeat dad, and who knows what we desire, we have a phenomenal opportunity to lean closer into those things, lining our desires with his, allowing our tastes and views to be changed. What's most important, opening our eyes to see differently, no longer trying to measure people by a long, exhaustive list that ain't nobody ever going to fully fill out. And you yourself don't even fully fill out. Don't even play yourself. But just really submitting that to God and allowing him to change our desires, to align more with his, our taste to align more with his. And God will just show up, man, in such phenomenal ways. But it takes us taking that step to trust him and trust that he has the final authority. And I just really hope that as we land this plane and we land this conversation, that one of the greatest things that you could make the decision to do is starting now, save yourself. Starting now, preserve your body. Starting now, make a commitment that I'm going to honor my future wife by making decisions in my singleness today, making decisions in my healing today, to now begin investing in myself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, and even financially, to be willing to heal through these spaces appropriately. So that way I can show up as the best man I need to be in my marriage and family. So I can show up as the best woman and wife I need to be in my future family and marriage. And that starts today. And stop letting people pump you for free. Just like you go to the gas station and you get your gas, that stuff don't cost, that stuff ain't free on a day-to-day basis. That stuff ain't free. You can't just pump gas and pull off. You got to go pay. It comes at a cost. It comes at a cost for you to get access to that fuel and to get it in your car and go. So I need you to stop giving people so much free access to you. Some of you might need, some of you might be listening to this and saying your biggest challenge might be, hey, Lord, I just need to start trusting you. Maybe your challenge is, Lord, I just might need to start trusting you more with my sexuality. Lord, maybe it's not even, you don't even know where to start. Maybe it's like, Lord, just open my heart to reveal to me what it is you're trying to get to me through the end of this. What do you need me to see more of that's actually going to help me see the value of the lives around me and see the value that you placed in me? Lord, I struggle to trust you with my decisions in terms of who to date and who to go after and who to pursue. You know exactly the type of person I've made. But if I'm being honest, Lord, I honestly don't even know where that typo has came from. I don't even know where this type of person is even rooted from. And Father, I just need help. And I want to journey with you. Lord, give me wisdom. Open my eyes to see people the way you do. Deal with my heart to actually approach people the way that you desire me to, that reflects your love and not something that's so selfish that causes me to look at people as products, that causes me to turn to people who reject me and call them all kinds of names after I had just approached them and said how beautiful they were, but their no turned me into a nasty looking individual. Lord, help me, Father, as I transition into this space that's unknown and that's so scary. I'm scared of what people will think about me. I'm scared of perhaps this relationship that I have where I got to come to an end of a grips and make a decision to put my foot out and say, hey, no more. We're not going to keep having sex because we're not married. You haven't made that commitment. And I'm afraid that if I made that decision that they're going to leave. Lord, deal with my heart and give me the boldness to step into what you're calling me to. And help me to really rest in the value that you have designed me in so that I don't have to second guess it when I come across somebody who can't see it. Like, that's my prayer for you. You know, that at my heart, I know I've done a lot of vibrato and hypeness and all that kinds of, but at the core, man, that's my heart for you. And sharing this entire story and hoping that it impacts you to not just tell your story and to know that God is just as active in the stories that you carry, just as he is in mine, but also to just learn the importance, man, of how valuable your body is, preserving your body is, and just the differences that it can make in your life moving forward. Because that's what I want for you. I don't like nobody playing around with your feelings like this. I just don't. And I want to be the guy that speaks life into you in those spaces to help you see the value you really carry so people don't get access to you so willy-nilly. All right. I do have a story that I could share. Maybe I'll be brief. I think one of the things that had helped me really start stepping into sharing more of my story of my virginity, I actually started being honest about this when it came around 2019. And there was a friend of mine who I was sitting at, a local spot out here after a football game that we went to, where a group of her friends were tagging along. They invited me. I went. We enjoyed ourselves, had phenomenal conversation. And in the midst of that conversation, I remember her looking up and asking me, "Are you a virgin?" To which, for the first time ever, I had responded an honest answer to such a question. Yes, I am. And it seemed to take her aback because of maybe the stereotypes that I kind of fit. I'm a tall, black basketball player. And so those things just don't mesh into somebody who's caring enough about their body to say no and express self-control and self-discipline. And so, of course, as I was in this phase of transitioning out of what I cared about, what had people said about me and all those kinds of things, I got to a place in the midst of the conversation where I began to share why I made my decision. And it was never in the midst of telling her how bad and awful she was and how this, that, and the third was, because I don't think anybody ever changes by you telling somebody how awful they are. And that was never even my heart's intention, just like it's not my heart's intention with this entire conversation we're sharing together. And I remember telling her the reasons I made my decision. And it's much like what I shared with you here, that my value, I just really believe that my value is worth more than a one night stand. I really believe that my value is worth more than what somebody had in high school may have aimed to limit it to, because there was so much inconsistency happening in those hallways with relationship to relationship, person to person. And I could just tell that nobody was really coming with an energy to commit. You were just coming with the energy of what I could do for you in the moment, or what you could do for me in the moment. Right. And it was never something that was legit. And I remember sharing that with her alongside with some other details regarding my testimony. And as we continued sharing, there were some emotional strings that were pulled. in such a conversation. But I remember coming back and following up with her after that because, you know, everybody went their own ways. We connected again a couple years later. And I remember reaching out to her via Instagram DM and just giving her appreciation as a part of a challenge that I was doing, just sending gratitude messages to people who had an impact in my life, I believe is what I was doing at the time. And I remember telling her, hey, you know, I really appreciate you so much for that conversation that we shared, and the insights that you gave me to things I didn't even know. You know, at the time she had told me as we were having that conversation, like she wished she didn't have sex. Like she wished she would have kept her virginity. She wished she would have done those things. And to hear that from somebody who I considered a very dear friend, that meant a lot to me, to be somebody who I always thought I was behind. And yet she's like, no, I wish I would have kept it together. And, you know, as she was sharing, as I was expressing these things, just being grateful, she said, I'm gonna be honest. If I had to be honest, like that conversation meant a lot to me too, and impacted me a lot. And I was like, oh, really? Didn't even know it, but I dove deeper. How was that? And she ends up telling me that not only off of that conversation did she choose to go, and in her words, celibate, but that she then was pushed into a direction of growing closer with God, and attending Bible studies with an individual at the time who was a friend who actually turned out to be somebody she married, which was so beautiful at the time. And I remember just being so elated. I was playing a Madden game at the time of me sending those messages. And when she told me that, I was just so done with the Madden game. I quit out because I just couldn't believe what I was reading. And it was the simple fact that such a story that I shared from a genuine place of expressing to her what I believed my value was, that, and maybe in some aspects put into context the value that she carries to help her see her value, that allowed her to actually make a decision that did a number of a difference in her life, is what encouraged me to know that my story has impact, to know that my story still means something, to know that no matter where I am and what I've done or where I'm headed, that the value that I carry is dependent on the one who created me. And I am so grateful to be able to share this with you guys. Not just to, I don't come on here to just again with such a pompous attitude or I'm better than you. No, I just made a better decision. And by better decision, I just mean, hey, I've actually seen better results going this way compared to what maybe I could have been tempted to go in a different direction. I just made a different decision that I was better off for. Let me communicate it that way. I made a different decision that I was better off for. And I'm encouraging you to do the same, because I think your marriage would appreciate it. Your future spouse is going to appreciate it. The stories that you tell others in such a transition, those people are going to be impacted and appreciated in such great levels, because it's a decision worth making and it's a decision worth sticking to. And I am more than proud to continuously tell you that I've remained a virgin this far in my life because of the things I've listed throughout this entire conversation. And I don't regret it. I don't regret it. And I don't want you to regret it either if you're in that same space. I don't want you to feel bad about your virginity. I don't want you to know your virginity is a beautiful thing. And you ought to keep that for the spouse that you're going to commit to. Homie, keep that. Girl, keep that. Sis, bro, keep that. Because I just think that just speaks to recognizing your value. And to those who may have compromised, now is your opportunity to see your value in a whole nother light and make a decision to say, I'm going to choose to move differently. And that's still a story worth being told, and still one that is worth others hearing, that can still have an impact on other lives that you encounter. And that's my hope for you in this entire conversation. And I hope everything that I shared made sense to some degree as we just kind of unpacked and processed my story, why I've chosen to remain a virgin, and why I encourage others who are in that same space to remain a virgin until you're married, because that is where the life really is, in experiencing that and building on that together. Gosh, y'all, I'm telling you, like I desire to be married. I can't wait. Well, I'm gonna say it like this. I say I can't wait. I can wait. I can wait but it's just like, I just know that it's going to be an amazing time. Not because of what the performance is going to be like in bed and all the different positions I can imagine. No, it's not even that deep. It's just because I know that this is going to be a lifelong opportunity for us to build on this from the first time we do it. That's going to allow us to continue an opportunity to just take our relationship to a whole nother level, that allows us to serve one another at greater levels, love one another at greater levels, understand one another at greater levels, communicate at greater levels, and experience and please one another at greater levels. because behind it is going to be so much of a story of who we are, where we came from, the context to our relationship, the family that we're trying to build. It's just going to carry so much meaning. And the greatest thing of it all, I don't got nobody to compare it to. That's probably the biggest flex I got, is I don't got to compare it to nobody. And I just think that's a beautiful thing, because then it makes it authentic and it makes it legit. And if you remember nothing else from this conversation, please remember that sex is not ice cream samples. Stop test driving people. Stop taking test samples. Start moving in commitment. Start stepping up, drawing those boundaries, making those decisions. And if somebody does not respect that decision for you to say, hey, I don't want to do this anymore until we married, then they are not the one for you. And you've got my permission to throw up the deuces. All right. I appreciate you guys so much for this conversation. And I'm excited to continue just diving in more into not just my angles and perspectives of stories, but so many other conversations that this stems from that I pray is going to be a blessing to you, as it has been to others that I've encountered, I've coached, and I've really been able to be in positions to pour in, give differing perspectives that have actually brought about beneficial relationships and healthier relationships that often starts with us doing the healing work on ourselves first. And sometimes it looks like unpacking stories like this to understand why we're making certain decisions and why your value is everything. I appreciate you guys so much. And until our next conversation, be easy and be breezy, my friend. Check it. Peace.